I have for you today a letter addressed to the laity by Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. For those who are not familiar with him, Cardinal Walter Brandmuller is one of the 4 Dubia cardinals who submitted the now famous Dubia to Francis about Amoris Laetitia 4 years ago, and has never received a response. He has since retired from active ministry. His letter today is addressed to all of us, to the lay faithful, and in it he teaches a few basic things. That the motu proprio Traditionis Custodes clearly has not been received by the laity, meaning it has not been accepted. And any law of the Church is not binding if it has not been accepted by the laity. That may sound strange to our ears in this highly legalistic age that we live in, where the people submit to and obey all manner of monstrous overreaches by those with administrative and legislative authority. But the Cardinal reminds us that no law has binding authority in the Church if it is not accepted, and if not accepted, quickly gets abandoned and becomes obsolete. He provides examples of this from the post-conciliar period of the Church history as proof to back up his claim. He also provides us with some sound guidance, not to allow ourselves to be divided by the document, not to turn on one another. As Catholics, we must be united, for the world is watching. Look how they love us, he says. Now, on a side note, Cardinal Brandmuller's colleague, Archbishop Vigano, has a letter today as well, but it's just way too spicy for this place. If you'd like to hear it, I have it uploaded to the various audio-only podcasting platforms that you can find Return to Tradition on, places like Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. So look for it there or check the pinned comment for a link to today's show notes where you can find it in an embedded audio player, along with the direct links to this letter. Vigano's letter is different than that statement read on Dr. Taylor Marshall's show a few weeks ago, so check it out. Again, the pinned or top comment should have a link, or just look up Return to Tradition on any of the finest audio-only podcasting platforms that you might use. And I'll probably do a video here tomorrow using some excerpts from the Vigano letter and a larger analysis of it. Anyway, on to Cardinal Brandmuller's letter to the faithful on Francis's wicked motu proprio. Dubia Cardinal Walter Brandmuller's response to Traditionis Custodes and his instructions for the lay faithful in these strange times, by Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. With his motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, Pope Francis has practically unleashed a hurricane that has upset those Catholics who feel attached to the Tridentine rite of Mass, revived by Benedict XVI's Summorum Pontificum. From now on, according to the essential declaration of Traditionis Custodes, Benedict's Summorum Pontificum will be in large measure suspended, and the celebration of Holy Mass, with some exceptions, will be allowed only according to the Missal of Paul VI. A look at the blogger scene and other media outlets reveals how a global protest has erupted against this document, which is unusual in form and content. In contrast to the protest relating to the content of the Traditionis Custodes, it is now necessary to make some reflections here that refer to a fundamental principles of ecclesiastical legislation in regard to Traditionis Custodes. If the discussion about Traditionis Custodes has so far concerned the legislative content of the motu proprio, here the text will be considered from a formal point of view as a legal text. First of all, it should be noted that a law does not require special acceptance by the interested parties to require binding force. However, it must be received by them. Reception means affirmative acceptance of the law in the sense of making it your own. Only then does the law acquire confirmation and permanence, as the father of canon law, Gratian, taught us in his famous Decretum. Here is the original text. Laws are established when they are promulgated. They are confirmed when they are approved by the behavior of those who use them. For as due to the behaviors of users in an opposing direction, against the laws or not following the laws, quite a few laws today have been abrogated, so through the behaviors of the users, the laws are confirmed. This means, however, that for a law to be valid and binding, it must be approved by those to whom it is addressed. Thus, on the other hand, some laws today are abolished by non-compliance, just as, on the contrary, the laws are confirmed by the fact that those concerned observe them. In this context, reference can also be made to the possibility provided for by customary laws, according to which a justified objection against a law of the universal Church has, at least initially, a suspensive effect, In other words, a law not received does not go into effect. This means, however, that the law need not be obeyed until the objection has been clarified. It should also be remembered that if there is a doubt as to whether a law is binding, it is not binding. Such doubts could be due, for example, to an inadequate wording of the law. Here it becomes clear that the laws and community for which the laws are enacted are linked to each other in an almost organic way, to the extent that the community's bonum commune, common good, is their goal. Put simply, this means that the validity of a law ultimately depends on the consent of those affected by it. The law must serve the good of the community, and not vice versa, the community serving the law. The two things are not opposed to one another, but linked to one another. Neither can exist with or against the other. If a law is not observed, or is no longer observed, whether from the beginning or after a time, it loses its binding force and becomes obsolete. This, and this must be strongly emphasized, naturally applies only to purely ecclesiastical laws, but in no case to those based on divine or natural law. As an example of a lex mere ecclesiastica, a merely ecclesiastical law, consider the Apostolic Constitution Veterum Sapientia of the Ancients the Wisdom of Pope John XXIII of February 22, 1962, in which the Pope prescribed Latin for university teaching, among other things. Young scholar that I was at the time, I reacted by only shaking my head. Well, Latin was the norm at the Gregorian University in Rome, and this made good enough sense given the babel of languages among the students who came from all continents. But whether Cicero, Virgil, and Lactantius would have understood the lessons, note, given in a stumbling and fractured modern Latin, is doubtful. And then the history of the Church, even of modern times, taught in Latin, with all the love professed for the Roman language, how could it work? In other words, Pope John ordered the classes to still be taught in Latin, but no one knew Latin well enough, so many simply did not obey the decree. And so it remained. Veterum Sapientia was hardly printed, and soon forgotten. But what was this inglorious demise of an apostolic constitution meant for the prestige of papal authority became evident only 5 years later, when Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae in 1968 was nearly drowned amid protests from the Western world. The thing is done, therefore, friends, and now patience. Never has unenlightened zeal served peace or the common good. It was St. John Henry Newman who quoted the great Augustine, who reminded us, "The verdict of the world is conclusive." In the meantime, let's pay close attention to our language. Verbal disarmament has already been called that. In other words, in discussing this new law, do not resort to alarmed, strident, or nuclear language. In more pious words, no violation of brotherly and recently sisterly love. Now seriously again, what is a grotesque idea that the mystery of love itself, that is the Mass, the Eucharist, the holy sacrifice of Christ, could become a bone of contention? Again, we quote St. Augustine, who called the Holy Eucharist the bond of love and peace that encloses the head and members of the Church. No greater triumph of hell could be imagined that if this bond, the bond uniting Christians in brotherly love, were broken again, as has happened many times in the past. Then the onlooking world would grin. Look at how they love each other. In other words, if the Church divides into competing factions, one hating the other over this question, it would be the victory of hell and the cause of amusement for the onlooking world. Signed, Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. And so there you have it. Now, for those who might not know, Cardinal Brandmuller is very much a man of the council. He is very much a hermeneutic of continuity type bishop. He's very much a Benedict XVI type bishop. And I would really like to know what he thinks about Francis destroying the hermeneutic of continuity, erasing it. I'd really like to know, because his letter here was useful advice for the laity, but it didn't really address any of the main points of Traditionis Custodes, or the implicit points of which, as many have noted now, the ending of the hermeneutic of continuity is but one. I'd really like to know what he thinks on that, because the hermeneutic of continuity really was the only really plausible response to the sort of the stance of the Society of St. Pius X and similar organizations, and, well, Sedevacantists and others as well, about the state of the church after the council and the binding force of the council. And that point has not been brought up by any of the bishops who've chosen to respond to this yet. At least not to my knowledge, except for Vigano, of course. So check out that Vigano audio, which you can find linked to in the pinned comment or on any of the podcasting platforms that you may want to check it out on. And check out tomorrow's video, because there have been a number of bishops that have responded. I'm going to attempt to paint you a picture with what they're saying. Anyway, as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.